Hi, this is Ricky with the Lost Samba podcast, beleza? Today we're going to begin with a question. What do Jack Sparrow, Bugs Bunny, Aladdin, Robin Hood, and Brazilian soccer stars such as Romário and Ronaldinho, what do they have in common? The answer is malandragem. They are malandros. And what are malandros? We're going to explain. And nothing better to begin this explanation with Moreira da Silva, the king of Carioca Malandragem.
Na beira da praia, fui logo cercado por lindas garotas, umas gostosas e outras marotas, enquanto os playboys de água na boca nos miravam de lado, olhos de jacaré dopado. Eu, o seu Silva, num papo avançado, controlava sorrindo aquele grupo feminino. Chamei a primeira pra dar o mergulho na água gelada, pra acalmar minha vanguarda enquanto
So,
na
before
praia...
talking about Kid Morengueira, the great Moreira da Silva, let's talk a bit about Malandragem. Now, let's start with the sad part of it. If Brazil is now the eighth most unequal country in the world, despite having the 11th economy in the world, imagine in those days when slavery was still fresh in the memory. It had ended only 50 years before. Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery in the Western world, and it was still there. The traces were still present. Now, imagine being born into the lower classes in that world. What made things worse was that the country was being flooded by all these industrial novelties such as cars, telephones, electricity, cinema, you name it. It was a very glamorous world, but your wallet couldn't afford it. You were uh, um, marginalized because of your social rank. You were smart enough to know that having a job wouldn't be the solution because jobs paid very badly. Only the rich folks had good jobs. Um, and you were also smart enough to know that crime was the dead end of a fast lane. It was a no go place. So, what do you do to make your um, vitality or your life energy flow in that world? The options were two. One was just to accept who you are. You got a low-paying job. You became a regular citizen, sad citizen, or the other way was taking the red pill and not accepting it and try to use your wits, your charm, everything you had to find your way and to get in or to crash into the party that the rich folks were having. Malandragem, although it is not within the confines of the law or what people would expect from good citizens, it had nothing to do with the thug life. There were no rival gangs killing each other. There was no cruelty. There was no violence. Violence was just about one guy who stole the women of another guy. But it was more, it was almost childish, so to speak. There was an innocence about the malandros who lived out of trickery, out of, saying the right word at the right time, being in the right place at the right time, having the right friends. It was all about that. On the downside of the malandragem, there was the recklessness, the selfishness, the smart-assness, um, being very unreliable. But hey, this is what happens in boardrooms, in politics, and everything else. This is the way real life is. In Moreira da Silva's world, roughly between the 1920s and the 1950s, malandragem and samba, and to a lesser degree, candomblé and capoeira, came in the same package. It's no wonder that the fans or the supporters of the Getúlio Vargas dictatorship hated samba, candomblé, and especially malandragem in any way or form. They wanted poor people to obey and accept their position that life had given them, that they were born into. Um, and obviously, they had no toleration for this kind of libertarian and anarchic culture. This brings us to the other side of the malandro coin, the otário. The otário is a victim of the malandro. It's like the defender against the Brazilian football star. Or like Bugs Bunny's victims, or like Jack Sparrow's victims, or Robin Hood's victims. These are the otários. Not coincidentally, most of these individuals belonged to the people who didn't like samba, malandragem, capoeira, and candomblé. Moreira da Silva was born into this world um, in the lower middle class neighborhood of Tijuca in Rio de Janeiro. His dad died when he was in his early teens. And after that, he abandoned school and had all sorts of jobs, like shoe polisher, guy who delivers meals in companies, street cleaner. Then he progressed to become a lower rank civil servant. And at the same time, he was into mechanics and stuff, and he became a cab driver and then later on an ambulance driver. And it was as a cab driver that destiny knocked on his door the day that the big sambista Ismael Silva took a ride on his cab, and he started talking, and he saw that Ismael saw that Moreira da Silva had talent and said, why don't you go to my recording company, Odeon, and try it out. I'll introduce you there, and you see what you can get there. He got the job and he did very well. And this was the golden age of samba. Samba sold very well. And he rubbed shoulders with big names like Francisco Alves, Ciro Monteiro, Mário Reis, the Miranda sisters. Carmen Miranda had a famous sister called Aurora Miranda. Was also a big success before Carmen went to the States and became solo. Nuno, among many others, with Ismael Silva also. So he was part of this golden generation of samba. This ended the day he accepted an invitation to go to Portugal. He spent like 3 to 6 months in Portugal living there and stuff, and the company didn't like it, and when he came back they stopped recording and he fell into ostracism. Then in the 50s bossa nova arrived. It's good to know that none of the sambistas liked bossa nova. They correctly or incorrectly thought that this was white boys samba, and the genre gradually faded out. It just went on selling to the lower classes. The lower classes also, for several reasons, stopped consuming. Moreira da Silva would reappear in the 70s when the underground artist Jadis Macalé, a great guy who knew the people of the Tropicali, was like marginal to them, but he wrote a lot of songs recorded by Gal Costa. He discovered Moreira da Silva. They became very good friends, and he started to tour Brazil with Moreira da Silva, and that brought him back to the spotlight. One of the things that happened in the heyday of the samba were the gafieiras. That were the nightclubs of samba. You'd have like big orchestras playing, and that's where people met, and the equivalent of a club nowadays. In the 70s, this also reappeared when Moreira da Silva reappeared. So it was like a revival of the old times. Obviously, it was very glamorized. Um, the Moreira da Silva went into a similar zone that Buena Vista Social Club went with salsa. He was an old guy representing the golden times of samba. And he was very popular because one thing that has to be said, the sambistas, right, that did this samba of malandros, they were very funny, right? They were hilarious. Not only Moreira da Silva, the Geraldo Pereira, Germano Matias, and even more recent guys, Zeca Pagodinho. He has some very funny songs. Um, and they were part of the one of the guys. They there was no pretentiousness of being like a great artist with a great voice and being glamorous. They just said how it is. They talked about the drugs, about the prostitution, about fights in the streets, um, always with a touch of humor. But they were the authentic thing. They were the real thing. So it was much like punks were or hip hoppers. They said it how it was.
Escurinha, tu tem que ser minha de qualquer maneira. Te dou meu boteco, te dou meu barraco. Lá no Morro de Mangueira. Comigo não há embararaço, meu pedaço, eu te faço, meu amor. A rainha da escola de samba, que o teu nego é diretor.
And this is probably why they didn't like Bossa Nova so much, because Bossa Nova appropriated that culture and cleaned it up. The song I'm going to play today involves a very significant part of the Malandragem, which is the Jogo do Bicho. The Jogo do Bicho is an illegal lottery that was very, very big. It's big until these days, where it's kind of a lotto. People bet on numbers, but every number represents an animal. One number will represent a monkey, the other one will represent a peacock. There's even one because viado, a deer in Brazil is gay, so one represents the gay people, one donkey, everything. So you bet on an animal, and there's a weekly draw, and if you are lucky enough, your number appears. And the way it works, if like the last number ends with I don't know 15, then you win less. But if you get the 4 numbers right, then you win big time, and that is milhar. You get the milhar, the 1,000 right, and that's the big score. And this is a song of a guy who bets in the bicho, and he wins the milhar. So the name of the song is Acertei no Milhar. Etelvina, o que é morengueira? Acertei no milhar, ganhei 500 contos, não vou mais trabalhar. Você dê toda a roupa velha aos pobres e a mobília podemos quebrar. Passe pra cá, passe pra lá, e é mobília pra tudo quanto é lado, quebrando na sala, no banheiro, no quarto, tudo quanto é lugar. Eu falei, nossa, mas não, eu acertei no milhar, tá tudo bem. Etelvina, vai ter outra lua de mel. Você vai ser madame e vai morar num grande hotel. Eu vou comprar um nome não sei onde, de Marquês, Morengueira de Visconde, e um professor de francês, mon amour. Eu vou mudar teu nome pra Madame Pompadour. Até que enfim agora sou feliz. Vou percorrer a Europa toda até Paris. E nossos filhos, ó que inferno, eu vou pô-los no colégio interno. E telefone a seu mané do armazém, porque eu não quero ficar devendo nada a ninguém. E vou comprar um avião azul para percorrer a América do Sul. Mas de repente, deu vida me chamou. na hora do batente, mas de repente, Edelvina me chamou. Acorda, Rick Moreira, seu vagabundo. Era um sonho, minha gente. The bosses of the bicho, of the jogo do bicho, the bicheiros, were the big gangsters, like the gangster figures of Rio, before the appearance of the drug lords, before drugs became a big thing, or big money maker in the underworld. And they are known to be patrons of Samba schools to help favelas with whenever they have a problem. And the drug lords do this, but the bicheiros, they never would go down to killing people or selling drugs that are bad for people's health. They have a dignified things that the old school mafia has in New York, or had in New York. I'm not aware of the New York underworld, but you see in films like the um, Godfather that the guys didn't want to sell drugs, and the new guys come in wanting to sell drugs. But in Rio, the Jogo do Bicho stayed doing their lottery, and the drug lords did their things. But they nowadays have more money; they employ more people. The Jogo do Bicho is more of a traditional thing. Understanding the dynamic between the malandros and the otários will take you deep into understanding Rio de Janeiro's culture. As a foreigner, you are an otário wanting it or not. Foreigners are seen as otários, malandros or malandros, otários as otários. There's a famous song by a guy called Moreira da Silva, a more recent malandro of Samba, top player in all prisons in Brazil, loved by everybody in the Malandragem, and he has this song said malandro, malandro, mané, mané. Mané is a way to call an otário, and anyway, in the Malandragem, there is a code of honor and of ethics, and it's more like a Robin Hood kind of thing, where you only do tricks on people who have money. You don't exploit poor people. You don't kill. You don't. As I said before, there's no gang violence. This brings us to the figure of the malandro otário. These are big businessmen, big tycoons. You have them all over the place, all over the world. It's a guy who has the means, he has money, and he acts as a malandro, but exploiting people, being dishonest. They're big politicians, candidates in the United States who and ex-prime ministers in the UK who were the malandro otários. That he acts as a malandro, but he's not. He's being toxic. He's being bad for the population. The real malandro, he knows where he belongs. A good example is the football player Adriano. He earned millions playing in Italy, and he went back. He's living in the favela. He helps everybody, and this is the proper malandro, right? Adriano does all the wrong things you can imagine. Ronaldinho also has this thing of the malandro. He's a very simple guy. All his money goes to help people in a smaller way. He does a lot of wrong things, morally questionable things in his private life, but he doesn't. He isn't toxic to society. Finalizing today's podcast, the malandragem is also very important for Brazilian football, who has been successful 5 times worldwide, all of them with big malandro players. You know, Ronaldo, R9, Romário, Ronaldinho Gaúcho, Pelé. He's big malandro, Garrincha before him, and all the Brazilian world championships. Brazil is the country with most world championships in football. It was all earned through Malandragem. So Brazil has a debt, at least sport-wise, to the Malanders. And with this, I wish you a good week, and I hope to see you the next one.